Welcome to the Writer's Block podcast. I'm writer Polly Roberts, and every episode I will be in conversation with another Cornwall-based writer, discussing process, why we write, and the part Cornwall plays in our work. I hope you find some wisdom and inspiration in what you hear. The Writer's Block is a creative writing centre for Cornwall. With innovation and creativity at our heart, we offer both a place to write and a unique approach to developing confidence and skills in writing for everyone. Natasha Carthew is a Cornish working-class writer and poet. She's written 9 books, including 3 YA novels, a novel, All Rivers Run Free, a book for the National Trust, prose poetry for Hypatia, and non-fiction. Her memoir, Undercurrent, a Cornish memoir of poverty, nature and resilience, is out in 2023. She is the founder of the Nature Writing Prize for Working Class Writers and artistic director of the Working Class Writers Festival. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi, Natasha, and welcome to the podcast. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great, thanks. Yeah, up at 6 o'clock this morning, editing and writing and all the usual. So, yeah, ready to take some time out and chat with you today, Polly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So that's all the usual. That's your normal morning, is it?
Yeah, it is my normal. I'm hoping for some time off in next month, August. So yeah, I'm looking forward to some downtime. But I'm always working. I think a lot of us writers, you don't really stop because you've always, even if you've kind of cleared the decks with deadlines and stuff, you've always got something in your head that you need to, make notes or think about. So yeah,
it's really funny, isn't it? It does just, the writer's work never ever stops.
It never stops. But I wouldn't do anything else.
No, I mean that's it. It's such a brilliant job to be able to have. But yeah, it is funny how I always think that too. I'll put a project down and think, oh, phew. And then I kind of think about it and it's like, oh, of course I've got 5 more on the go already.
Yeah, it's the nature of the job, isn't it? It's creative minds. We just keep busy. Yeah.
Did you
keep
find
ourselves busy?
Yeah. Have you always kind of had that busy creative mind then?
Yeah, always since I was a child. All I wanted to be was a writer. So that's, I mean, as soon as I could write stories, I was telling stories before I could write, so I could get to bed later. I'd sit on my mum's lap and it'd be bedtime and I'd just kind of start a story and then, learnt the art of the page turner, I suppose, because I'd then be like, and then what happened, and then what happened, and then I'll get a good hour of staying up because I was just telling stories, and then I'd go to bed and I'd be telling my sister that the next episode or whatever. So
wow, do you think you even knew what you were doing, that you were writing or creating stories? Or
I didn't. Yeah, and I didn't at that time, and it's only recently because I've been writing my memoir that I've just I realised how much that was just embedded in me and my personality from very early on, was just telling stories, which we naturally do as children, but I just haven't stopped, I suppose.
Well, and some people do just have that even more, isn't it? I mean, my mum said to me once, she said, oh, we kind of knew you'd be a writer because every time you saw any stranger, you would make up a story about, oh, and they are so-and-so and they're doing this and this is what's going on.
Exactly.
And it was
I always say that with people who are trying to learn to write dialect, is to just watch people and kind of think about, it's like the unsaid, think about what they're talking about, look at the body language, and also, the way that people never finish a sentence. None of us kind of really finish a sentence and someone else will butt in, and, that really helps for people. It's kind of a little tip, I suppose, is when you're writing dialogue is to just watch people.
I think it's a great tip. And I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because it is that particular observatory kind of nature of the writer, maybe to be curious about what else is going on there, not just the words being said, and then to translate that onto the page somehow.
It is, curiosity, that's it.
So do you think, when did the concept of being a writer come into your life?
I just started writing poetry, I suppose, from about the age of 8, 9. You have that moment where you're out in nature, and I've written all my books outside. I've written all my books in the wild, 8 books. My memoir's my 9th. And you're there in the kind of the storm on the beach, and you just kind of that passion inside is inside, it's outside. And you suddenly realise that a storm is within as well. And once you start to make that connection with nature, with the nature of self, I think that's probably was the moment. And then I from that moment on, I carried a little notebook in my back pocket of my jeans, and I would just write notes and ideas. And it could be song lyrics, poetry. So
Wow.
from a very early age, I've written, and I didn't want to do anything else. I didn't, I wasn't good at school. Well, I didn't care for school. I left school at 15. I was a bit of a wild child. So for me, all I wanted to do was write. So I knew that I wasn't going to have a second career.
Yeah.
I didn't want a second career. I worked in jobs, cleaning jobs, factories, whatever, for the bit of cash, so I could just spend the rest of my time writing.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
And so the writing at first, it just was that natural kind of reflex. So you'd go outside, you'd feel that connection to nature, you'd feel the things that I love that description of the storm outside, the storm inside. And then writing was just that reflexive way to express it.
It was, yeah. And I think it was that way to just understand the world around you and also to understand yourself. Once you make that connection with writing, you kind of can't stop, because that's really kind of the essence of all of us. And yeah, nature always has played an incredibly big part in my life. With what I write about, but also to know who I am and my place in the world, I suppose.
Yeah. Did that also just come innately, or were you raised in a particularly kind of rural way, or with connections made to nature?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in southeast Cornwall. Grew up in a village called Downderry, which, if anyone who knows it, is kind of about 7 miles from Loo, which would have been the nearest town. And I grew up in severe poverty, so we didn't have we didn't have any entertainment outside of our little village. So for me, writing and music, I suppose, as well, and lyrics was my entertainment. And then going out into nature.
Yeah.
It was free, it's there, it's beautiful, and it's harsh as well, especially when you live in poverty. It's not just the summers as people imagine in Cornwall. It's that harshness of our winters and the storms and everything else. So for me, nature was something that was for free, and then I could take that and then write about it, I suppose.
Did you find your community, that there were other people in your community making that connection too, and making the most of that free place to be able to thrive and find entertainment?
Yeah, as kids, growing up on a small council estate, we were very much a community, one big family, and we as kids would just head off for the day up in the fields or down on the beach, and play and make up our own stories, and have battles and. Just that freedom of children. I suppose also growing up in the 80s, you could just go off for the day. People didn't kind of worry as much as maybe they do now.
Yeah.
For other reasons, we could just head out and have these incredible days playing and exploring. And for me, I suppose I've never stopped that, because nature is all about exploration. And but the difference between me and everyone else was then I was recording it and getting it down. Getting it down.
So you were the only person doing that. Is that what you found?
Yeah. I'd say I was. That's why I'm successful now, I think, is because I've never stopped doing that.
Did you remember anyone kind of saying to you, "Oh, you could be a writer," or how did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, my mum always said I was a writer, and I was always just the storyteller. Like around a fire or bonfire on the beach, I would tell a story, or I was always interested in other people's stories as well. And I think that's the key as well to being a successful writer, is to not just think about yourself, but you have to be curious about everybody, the bigger picture, other people's stories.
Yes. Yeah, it's really funny. I'm actually really noticing more and more as my life goes on how many people kind of leave nowadays like voice notes just randomly being like, Polly, I've just like really decided that it would be fantastic to record these stories from my childhood. Maybe you can come and hang out. Or Polly, I've just been hanging out with this group of really interesting people and they've got such fascinating stories from this place. Maybe we can get you up here to record the story. And I'm just thinking, oh wow, I've really set something here that I hadn't realised in motion, of people gathering that I'm interested in their stories. And it's part of who we are, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that storytelling is in us from day dot. It's what separates us from the other animals, is that we are storytellers, and before we wrote anything down, we told stories, and people roamed the country telling stories.
And they would adapt. It's like the droll tellers, the Cornish droll tellers, they would adapt a story. So if they were speaking to fishermen, they would tell a story that involved fishermen. If they were talking to farmers, they would tell the same story, but the main characters would be a farmer or whatever. So, and that's what droll telling is. And that's what's inherent in us, is to tell stories and pick up a story and carry it. Like you're saying, you might listen to someone's story and then you will naturally tell the story in a different way as you pass it on. It's like Chinese whispers, and then the story becomes something completely different. And I love that. I think storytelling is especially for us Cornish, it's very important to us.
That's really interesting though, because something that fascinates me about your writing is how you've jumped from genres and you've kind of written for different people, different ages, different groups, and actually you saying that, I'm thinking, wow, so you were just doing that traditional story, not just, sorry, but you're using that traditional storytelling method of being able to adapt a story to, okay, hang on, I'm talking to young people now. Let me tell this story to young people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think naturally as we develop as writers, I mean, I was successful from a young age as a poet, writing poetry, but you might write a poem that thinks, oh, actually, this could be a short story. There's more to this poem than what I've got on the page. And so naturally you move on to, that's what brought me into fiction. And then that's what brought me into, writing memoir or writing nonfiction or writing field notes. It's all the same. It's just that, I think a lot of writers think, okay, they naturally put themselves in a box and can't see any way out. And you think, well, write it all. And if it's not working in one genre, it's going to work in another way, just experiment, because writing is fun. It is fun. And you have to just remember that and just kind of shift it around.
Have you managed to maintain that fun side of it then?
Absolutely. I love it. Love writing. Yeah. And writing memoirs just been because as I was talking to you now about those childhood games that we used to play, or you saying that you speak to people who have talked about things that have happened in their childhood, or they might like to record. Do it. Everyone should do it because it's such fun. Writing memoir for me was the most fun I've ever had. Because, in a way, it's also because it's already been written. It's in history. Whereas fiction, you can write yourself into a corner, then you have to dig yourself back out and find a different path. Whereas memoir or nonfiction it's happened. It's and so you're just rewriting, and you get deeper and deeper, and you find out things about yourself and other people that you never thought about before, and that's the fun of it as well.
That is really interesting, isn't it? Because when you're writing fiction, you've got so much control over the story, haven't you? But like you say, it's weird because at the same time as, I can absolutely control why this person's like this and why this happens and how that's going to happen. At the same time, because you're making it all up, there are holes that you find all the time of, hang on, how did it come like this? And how do I make sure it's not completely cliche and that actually there's still some kind of weird, interesting context to it? Whereas when you're working from your own life, there is a pathway, there is something that has already been trodden that's leading you there. But then at the same time, I guess none of us really understand our stories fully until digging back through them. So much must come to the surface.
Exactly. Yeah, so much just, things come to the surface, and then there's things that you didn't think that you would explore because you've kind of, your memory. That's the thing with memoir as well. It's memory. It's not that someone has given you loads of records of, family history records. It's literally memoir. So you have a little bit of that kind of grey area where you like, well, this is how I remember it, because that you can say that, and other people might say, well, I remember it different, but that's the nature of being different people.
Yes.
Yes. We're not all plugged into the same matrix. So that's why memoir is so brilliant, because it's, you can have two children writing the same story from their childhood and it'd be completely different narratives because of memory and because of individuality, and that's the beauty, I think.
And that's what I always say when I wrote a kind of travel memoir when I was about 25. It's probably terrible now, but I wrote it and released it by myself and is part of a big art exhibition. But I remember talking to some friends afterwards who were like, oh, how did you have the nerve to kind of talk about other people that were in your life or that you met? And I just kept saying, well, it's my experience. I hope that everybody that reads it isn't reading it as 100% fact of how everything was for everybody. I was just trying to own this is my individual take and my individual journey with this experience. And I think it is really interesting if you can approach each memoir with that, of this, wow, I'm getting a unique insight into one person's mind, which we never get to have, and then knowing that if it was someone else's mind from that same story.
Exactly. And I think with Undercurrent, which is the new book with Hodder, it's a memoir of nature, poverty, nature, and resilience is its title. So for me, the bigger picture of poverty growing up in that time, growing up in a council estate. I'm writing the story not just from my family's perspective, but from the bigger community.
Right.
So again, as you're saying, I'm mindful not to kind of be putting anything in there that is harmful in any way, but it is a true account because I want it to go into history, I suppose, as a moment in time when, it's so important for people to know about the issues, the social issues we have in Cornwall and we still have now, and the similarities and the differences between growing up in poverty in the 80s and how people are experiencing poverty now in Cornwall and also in the rural country, across the land where we have a lot of, severe problems. So for me, it is making sure that I got that true account, that bigger picture, that social account, I suppose. That's not just me, but within that setting.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that actually, whether there was a kind of greater drive, a greater purpose or hope that you had for this book. And it's Undercurrent and it's being released, is it May next year?
It's April actually.
Okay.
April, with Hodder.
Amazing. But there was this hope of, did you get a contract before the book and that incited you to write it? Or was this something you started already?
No, I mean, anyone who knows me knows I talk about rural poverty and social economic issues in this country anyway, and coming from a working class perspective. So I pitched it I chatted to my brilliant agent and we drew up a pitch. Basically, you just draw up a kind of a, just to kind of like what the things you've got to cover. And then it goes out. Then it goes out to publishers. So we were really good because we got quite a few publishers interested. So it went to auction, which was absolutely incredible.
Wow.
So then it's like you're interviewing the editors. Usually it's an editor will kind of be asking you questions. And so that was good fun because you got to really know a lot of editors and what they were interested in and how they saw the book. And because it's a memoir, it's so close to your heart. That moment when you have that connection with an editor and that, this person is going to do the utmost best for the greater good of the book. Because it's not just, as I said, it's not just about my upbringing. It's about that bigger picture, that moment in time, that time I grew up in.
Yeah. And so what is your hope from the book? If that book could do something for the world or something for someone?
I want as many people as possible to read it and say, that's my community, and what can I do to change? What can we do to change? Because obviously that gap is getting wider and wider. And we really need to think about our beautiful rural locations and what harm is being done, and how to change that, or how to be mindful that we don't let things, these huge big houses. My village down Derry, where I don't live there now. I can't afford to live there. The houses that are being built there, kind of, I would say, unregulated.
Right.
Huge big houses. They're not for locals.
Yeah.
And that's fine to kind of, to try to have a balance. People might argue, but the thing is, we all know people are being priced out of their villages all over Cornwall, all over the southeast. All over Cumbria. It's not just here, and so that's what I want people to connect, and for us all to get together and not just think about our own little area, but actually look around the country and around Europe or wherever, and be like, well, what can we do to change, or how can we be mindful to put in steps to make sure that the change doesn't happen, and then we can't get it back.
Yes.
Because these beautiful places are just being completely trashed, basically. Downderry is a mess.
And being down here myself, I know exactly what, I can picture it without being there, and I think it's really interesting to me, actually, considering when just hearing you talk, it's really jumping out to me actually why Undercurrent is important, because I'm suddenly thinking, do you know what? I feel really naive to this too. So many of the books or films or programs that I've watched or read that have represented those poorer communities are urban, and there's just this picture of that. That's what is on offer, and that's where poverty lies. And actually, there's a kind of completely invisible line to the rest of the world. It feels like, or to a lot of the country.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Rural poverty, people don't think about it. I mean, if you put it into a Google search, people you see it like whole continents like Africa, which is a whole complete new different ball game, and also incredibly important. But rural poverty here is really kind of forgotten about, because people think of tower blocks and inner cities, and of course they have their problems, but we have a lot of problems that are different, because we have transport problems. We don't have transport, basically. Our infrastructure in Cornwall is absolutely ridiculous. Our trains are just cancelled all the time. Our airports are too expensive. So we have that problem. We have connectability for writers to be able to travel to anywhere to read their poetry, for example. That was my trouble. That was my problem growing up when I was young, because we didn't have a car. So I had to walk 10 miles to get into Plymouth to do any event or whatever. So then opportunities are lost. And that's not unique to me. That's unique to every rural community. When you don't have the money, you don't have the car, you don't have the transport, you don't have the money for the train if the train arrives. The list goes on and on. And that's why I kind of fight this fight, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've fired me up now. I can feel it burning. But no, and I mean, it's interesting. I think it's such a valuable concept as well, this idea of the importance of nature in that too. So it's, yes, there are these problems in the rural community, but then there is this huge value to being able to be amongst that nature and have that freedom and access that you had growing up as well, and the richness that brought you. And just again, all of what you've talked about, then that point of being pushed out of that access to that, and then also the inaccessibility that you have from being surrounded by that, or that freedom being taken away by pollution or buildings or whatever it is that's just mindlessly entering into those communities too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's it in a nutshell, really. So for me, this book is very important, and I'm looking to tour as much as possible, just not just around Cornwall, but as many places as possible, just to talk and connect to other communities, so we feel less alone. I think that's really important as well.
Well, you've sold it to me, so I think you've probably sold it to all our listeners already, so keep going, Natasha. I was interested in, when you're talking about transport there, that was something I'd been really curious about, is how have you managed to get out of Cornwall and break through to, because you've published with several different publishers actually, which is quite unique as a writer, and you've managed to gain a reputation across the whole country, well, UK wide really. And how did you form those relationships, and how did that start for you?
Well, career-wise, as I say, I started with poetry, and I was pretty successful there. But then when I wrote my first book, Winter Damage, which is set on Bodmin Moor, I immediately got an agent, and I immediately got a contract with Bloomsbury, which was brilliant. And they decided they didn't know whether it would be put out as an adult or as young adult. And they decided with young adult, which is absolutely fine. So I then got a second contract with them, and then a third contract. So I got my first 3 books. Fiction is with Bloomsbury, and then my 4th fiction was with Quercus, All Rivers Run Free, which is set on the River Tamar. It's from source to sea, and it's almost like a travelogue in a way. But this girl trying to get home from North Cornwall at the source of the River Tamar, down to here, southeast Cornwall, where I'm from. So for me, that was because I'd done the young adult thing, which was kind of by default, I wanted to make sure that my next book was very definitely for adults. So that's literary fiction. I mean, all my work is literary fiction, working class literary fiction, I suppose. So and then from there, I've done a couple of books, prose poetry with the National Trust and with Hypatia down here, which was my latest book, which was called Born Between Crosses, which was brilliant because they're Cornish women's literary charity.
Yeah.
And then signed the memoir. So I just love writing, and I just love to kind of explore genres, and I mix them up as well, and they might be put in one box, they might be put in another, but that's it.
Yeah.
That's the fun of it.
I mean, I don't mean to laugh there, because there's just that simplicity of it that I'm thinking, why shouldn't it be like that? I just like to write. I just write because actually there is this idea a lot of the time, I feel like I'm fed anyway. What type of writer are you then? What do you write? And what are you going to write next? And this assumption that it will kind of keep going the same. Who is your publisher? And actually there's something quite refreshing about, well, no, I just write actually, and I see what I explore. You've used that word several times, that exploration being important.
And write, I mean, for anyone, writers listening to this podcast, is write for yourself, 100% write for yourself, and then see what's out there. I think a lot of people worry about what's popular at the moment, so they try and fit into that. Also at the time, I think maybe a lot of people don't realise everything takes a lot of time. So whilst you're waiting for your next edits to come back, write some poetry or write a short story, explore different things and read all the different genres and all the different things, because that's really where you think, oh, okay, I can merge this with that. You can kind of cross stuff. You can. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. Do you know, I can sometimes, quite often, I can forget the reading aspect, and then I will find a book and I'll start reading, and I feel my body literally filling with inspiration, and I just, every time I'm like, oh God, Polly, just next time, just pick up a book, just keep on picking up books, because it's just such a key to it, and somehow I forget all the time.
Yeah, and music as well. Listen to music, listen to lyrics, TV, films, watch dramas. That's. I've just watched for the second time the series Sharp Objects, which is absolutely brilliant series. If anyone's seen that, if you haven't, watch it, because that is an absolute masterclass in writing and dialogue and what is unsaid. I think people sometimes forget about those gaps between. It's the unsaids.
Yeah.
It's not those peaks, it's also those troughs, and it's you immerse yourself in creativity.
That's a lovely piece of advice. How do you balance then all of these different projects? If there's always, I mean, we were just talking before the podcast about the fact that this morning you were up early, and I mean, me too, but I think I only got as far as the dog walk and thinking about what I'd do that day and sitting outside and having my breakfast, but you'd already worked on your edits and thought about finishing a article for Miss Lexia. So how do you balance between it all?
Yeah, you just have to stick with what you need to do that day. Like, I'm pretty strict on my day. I work like as in inverted commas a normal working day hours, and that's really important for me. So if I know that I have an article to finish, I will work on that till it's finished, and then, but if something is more important and then that can be put aside for a day, then I will do that. But I will work up until lunchtime, and I will have a break, and then I'll be working up until kind of 4 or 5 o'clock, depending. And when I'm writing fiction, I do 3,000 words a day, which is pretty much that's a chapter for me. So that's how I work it out. So a chapter a day is 3,000 words.
Right.
And I write longhand as well, so that's easier for me to not be distracted. So, and that's why I write outside, actually, because with wild writing, you're not distracted by your phone, by your laptop. You're not looking through screens. You're literally immersed in nature, and you've got your writing. So there's no excuse, You've just, here I am with my writing pad and my notepad, and off you go.
Yeah. I think that's something that I've forgot. I used to write everything longhand first, up until very, very recently. And every novel or longer book that I've written it all outside as well. And I think there is that element, exactly what you're describing, of that everything else is pulled away from you. I mean, I've noticed more recently that I get this urge to write when I go away from home, if I'm traveling or if I'm on a trip. And it's the same thing, I guess, actually, that the dishes aren't there, the things to think about around the house aren't there, and that I can just immerse myself in that imaginative space and relax into it. But I've never thought that actually I could also just go back to walking down the road and sitting under a tree and finding a little spot to get away from it all there as well and immerse in it.
Yeah, exactly. And inspiration as well. Like if the chapter's not working, you look around yourself. You don't have to be in the country. You can be in a park. You can be in a coffee shop. A lot of people write in coffee shops or whatever. You just look around you and write something else, write an observation, and then the next minute you'll be back in the work that you have to do. I've never had writer's block because of that.
Right. Wow. So never in your life.
No.
Amazing.
Because you just write something, and then you're back in it. Yeah.
Amazing. And do you have regular spots that you go to write outdoors?
Well, yeah, I do. I go for a walk, and then I'm wherever I find myself. But by the liner, the river liner here, so often I write down by the liner. But I've also got I call it my writing cabin, but it's just a little kind of. It's kind of like a half a shed that I've made with scrap wood. I made it years ago, actually, and I wrote Winter Damage in it. Was the first book, which is 10 years ago.
Right.
So it's still standing, but it's kind of it's kind of like a shed, really, to be honest. And half of it is outside, so you're away from the weather, but you're still outside. Yes. It's got a bit of a roof. But yeah, my writing cabin, and that's done me well for 9 books so far and counting.
Amazing. So have you been where you're based now for quite a while then?
Yeah, I've been in this house. It's in the Tamar Valley for 20 years. Yeah, wow. Yeah. So it suits me.
Oh my gosh.
It's a lovely little cottage. Yeah.
And you living with your partner? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So do they work in a very kind of 9-to-5 way too? I'm always curious about how writers work around that.
Yeah, she works in education, so she's in and out. I mean, she used to be always out, but obviously during COVID and everything, so. Often she's on Teams and things, but that's fine because I'm outside. I think it's harder for couples who have had to work in the house, and you have your 2 tables or your 2 offices or whatever it is, depending on the size of your house. But I do like to get out and be out, as it were. Yeah.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I'm thinking just from my own experience, but also from talking to people, like you say, the last few years when there was a lot of suddenly everybody working from home and trying to work the same hours, and those distractions are just quicker and easier to come by, and it's just easier to even doing something kind like offering someone another cup of tea, but actually then you break the flow and
and then you, all of a sudden you're putting the hoover around.
Yes, and exactly.
Yeah, and you've got This Morning on all of a sudden on the telly. And yeah, exactly. I'm quite strict on myself because of doing this for so long. I think when everyone started to have to work from home, I was just thinking, God, why is everyone having such problems? It's because I remember back when I first started working full time as a writer. That was hard to get yourself into a routine, but I've done it for so long now that I'm just, I'm hard on myself.
Yes.
So you have to be strict.
Yeah,
if you want to get the work done, you have to be strict.
I think that
you can't procrastinate.
I can see that actually, that if that was the job that you kind of started with young, then you already started it with that same flow of, this is my work ethic, this is what I expect out of work. Rather than kind of coming to it later thinking, writing, that might be a bit more free and easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
exactly,
do you find you still have to do the other types of writing work in order to maintain being a writer as a living, so teaching writing or writing articles, or is it more that for you would love to do all of that anyway? That's all part of being a writer for you.
I like to talk about what it means to be a writer from a disadvantaged background. It's really important for me now as a successful writer that I spend time talking to groups, or I spend time at festivals talking about that.
Yeah.
because I think, it's representation. And there's also younger people, if they see themselves represented on the stage or, in an article, they then think, oh, I can do that too, and I think that's really important for me. So I like to write the articles just because I'm a kind of a big mouth, I suppose, really, and I just like to talk about the subject. I can talk about it all day long, about working class issues for writers, because it's for me, if we don't, we're going to lose authentic voices. We're going to lose those authentic stories. Yeah.
And you're such a good advocate for it, so just keep on doing it. But it's really amazing to me how prolific you are. So the amount of books you've written and writing work you've done, but then also, so you are the director of the Working Class Writers Festival and the founder of the Nature Writing Prize for Working Class Writers. How did that come about?
Well, Class Festival was just, I had been touring with All Rivers Run Free, my book with Quercus, and I was going to lots of different festivals, and I just kept seeing the same people on the stage, who were predominantly middle class, white middle class people. And I was just thinking, oh, where are the people like me? Where are these other stories? So I started chatting to a few people and asking them how they got to the festival. They weren't being paid a fee. None of us were, which I don't accept now as a writer, but back then I did. And they weren't paid any travel or anything like that. And I thought, okay, this is not right, because only people who can afford to go to festivals will be going to festivals to read their books. So people who have can't afford travel or accommodation, people who can't afford to take time off work or childcare, those sorts of issues. Yeah. So I just put something out on Twitter. This was 2018.
Yeah.
I just put something out on Twitter to say, oh my God, we need a festival of our own. And I kind of, like looking around thinking, is someone going to go, yeah, I'll do it? And nobody did. So then I was like, oh, okay, I'll do it. And it was a huge moment, because it was hundreds and hundreds of people saying, yes, we need this. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it, naively, big mouth writer. So then we had COVID. So yeah, the inaugural festival was last year, 2021. In Bristol in October, and it was incredible. We had lots of famous writers and workshops. We embedded ourselves in the community as well as in the city, online things. And it was brilliant. I made 62,000 I raised.
Wow.
For the festival, which was Arts Council in part, and my co-partners, funding was from Hachette UK, who is my publisher anyway, and Penguin Random House. So that 62,000 meant we could pay a wage pay a fee, speaker's fee for every single writer.
Wow.
Exactly the same, and also accommodation and travel for everybody, and all workshops, panels, everything was free, which was,
oh my
brilliant.
Gosh.
Yeah, and it was really important for me as well to have people represented, not just working class writers be on stage, but also editors and agents who are, famous, like Hachette did a speed pitching with editors from all their divisions. And that was absolutely incredible, because it meant anyone could come and chat to an editor for like 15, 20 minutes.
Wow.
And we had panels with agents as well. And so it was really good. It was really, I'm looking for funding now, but for next year, we're touring with it at the moment this year. But yeah, it was very successful. I mean, up until the point of it happening, I was telling everyone who knew me, please don't let me do it again. I'm exhausted and I have no time for myself, and I wanted to just write. But as soon as it happened, I'm like, oh, this is something that has to continue.
Yes. Because
it's not about me. It was definitely, it's about the community, and it's about representation and positivity, really.
I can feel that from a lot of my works. Well, not a lot, just sometimes that feeling where in the process it starts just being so difficult, and it's that feeling of I can't do this again. And then when you get to that output moment, being like, oh yes, this is why this is worth it. This is immense, actually. Yeah, exactly. And the feedback was incredible. And we also had 2/3 of the audience in our feedback had never been to a creative, like a literary event or a literary festival in their lives. So for the audience point of view as well, that was really important, that we
that we did that, because that meant that we did what we stepped up to do.
That's actually incredible, because there is something really interesting to me about the inaccessibility of literary events, and not necessarily just the cost, as in people not necessarily feeling welcome to attend, not feeling a sense of why they would attend or that they'd be able to understand. I've been doing a project recently with Newlyn Art Gallery, where they've been putting Arts Council pieces of artwork into 9 schools down in Penwith area in the Isles of Scilly, and the idea being, how can we bring art to people who maybe wouldn't otherwise feel like they could connect or could interact with art or feel comfortable to go to an art gallery. And I hear that a lot about writing events, that it's all a writing workshop, a writing speech, like, I'm not sure that that's for me. So to be able to get that audience in and make it accessible, that's a real feat.
Exactly. And for us as creative directors or whatever, is we need to think outside the box. So we need to think about going into communities, or going into working class communities, or going into schools, as you say, just to open up the idea, is the possibility of maybe you can do this, possibility that, and that's why so many working class writers spend time going into schools to talk to kids, because they can tell them their story. They can say, look, I'm like you, I've made it, and it is a lot harder. But, that inbuilt tenacity, you can do it. Yeah. It's hard, but you can do it. And don't, so many people are told at school that you get a normal job because you'll never make it as a writer because you come from poverty or whatever, and so that's why a lot of us do that, is order to say, look, you can do it. But you've got, it's hard, but who says you can't? Who says?
And looking back, can you see that in your own life, that those cheerleaders that helped? So you mentioned your mum in terms of like helping you think, I tell stories. That's what I do. Actually, I can do this.
Yeah.
That all really
only just my mum though. Yeah, like nobody at school. No, right. I had no cheerleaders at school. Some people do have, that one teacher that champions them, but I didn't. But I naturally have always championed myself. So as the more I would take, the more I would be told, no, you can't do something, the more I wanted to kind of,
Amazing.
prove people wrong.
Yeah.
You want to prove people wrong because you kind of have that, how dare you tell me that I'm never going to be a successful writer? You're kind of like, right, the gloves are off. Yeah. Let's do this,
No. So,
I
definitely relate to that. I was a very stubborn child. I am who I am, and I'm doing what I want to do.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
That's amazing. I wonder about, we've talked about the part that Cornwall's played in your work in terms of it as an inspiration and the passion that you have from your upbringing there and how that drives your work. But you have chosen to stay down here. Did you ever move away for a short period, or has it always
I did move away. I moved away when I was 21, maybe. 20, 21. Moved a few places, moved to London, which was great, but I for me, there was that pull. I think when you're Cornish, you often do have that pull, and you just have to return. And it's returning to the ocean as well. It's not just about Cornwall. It's about, it's where I'm from. And it's not about family either. It's just in my blood. Like, I can't explain when I'm away. You just naturally want to come back. Mm-hmm. And I think that's for a lot of us. It's played such a big part in my writing. All my books are set in Cornwall. Yeah. It's just naturally, like, I just, and I think it's great for people who want to write about different places. And I write about different things, obviously, but for me, I'm still, it's just so much here that I want to kind of explore. Yeah. And not just the landscape, but and us people, but it's just, there's so much more to explore. I think with the memoir, that was kind of another way of exploring from my perspective. But yeah, I love it. So yeah.
Do you think there's more memoir in you?
Yeah, and I think there is actually, kind of like the part 2, because this memoir is from first memories up until the age of 20, when I moved to Plymouth to go to college, to do A-levels. So that's that period of time. But then the period of time after that is quite interesting as well. So we'll see what my editor thinks. But I've got so many stories. So So it's I'm writing. I'm planning fiction now. Actually, I'm trying to take August off so then I can plan my next book,
Right.
Which is fiction, which I'm just so mad excited about that. Yeah, I just have to not say yes to anything now for the next for the next week.
For it.
Yeah, so then I've got some time to relax and be creative.
It's
in the purest
interesting,
sense.
isn't it? It's really, I'm pregnant at the moment, and actually there's this element that I keep noticing of wanting to give space for that baby, just wanting a bit of time during the incubation period. And I was thinking the other day, do you know what? This is exactly the same as when I have a book up my sleeve or a creative project going on, that there's just that feeling of, okay, hang on a second, I need to step back and give space for this. And
Well, it's kind of, you just get that key word you just said is incubation, isn't it? And when you have an idea for a story, you don't know where it's going to go, and you literally just got a notebook writing bits down, random things. But that is that incubation of just, it's not fully formed.
Yes, yeah.
It's there, yeah.
What will you do in August then? What's your kind of helpful things to do for that period?
Is just lots of outdoor things, lots of hiking, swimming, exploring, and then just reading and making notes, planning for the first couple of weeks. And then probably the last week of August is writing a chapter overview, and all going well into September is where we'll start.
Amazing.
That new book.
These days, would you already send that, once you've kind of got to that planning stage, would you send that to a publisher already, or would you still wait for the final piece?
My agent always is the first port of call anyway. So with fiction, you write the full story, and then my agent will look at it. Whereas with non-fiction, is the concept first. So this book I'll write it and then get over to her and see what she thinks. Yeah.
Have you had the same agent since that get-go?
No, I haven't. No, this agent she's just incredible. Yeah, she's all the things I ever wanted. I think a lot of times with writers, especially when we're younger, you stumble across an agent or they stumble across you, and you're like, yeah, brilliant, and they might get you a deal, and mine did. Yeah. Both this is my third agent I'm with, who I'm happy to be forever. She's just perfect. But those early days, you are, especially maybe coming from working class background, you jump and you say, right, okay, yes. Yeah. You say yes to the first because you say, oh my God, I don't want to lose this but then they're not the right person for you, or they are at first, but then things change, Yeah. But I think it's really important to be truthful as writers and to think sometimes if something's not working, you have to take that risk and cut ties, and then hopefully and have faith that someone else will pick you up. So
But it's such intimate work, isn't it? And I found it really curious myself with when I did get contracts with publishing houses to notice the difference between how happy I would be to have my work critiqued in a workshopping space, absolutely open to receiving feedback and being able to follow my inner compass on, that's cool, I'll take that, or I'll put that to the side. And then the difference when I'm hearing it from the person who is meant to be, again, that champion of my work, and realising, wow, it's so intimate that that connection has to be there, actually, that trust. And
your relationship with your agent is the biggest relationship you're ever going to have in publishing, because editors come and go, but your agent is your champion, really, and because they stick up for you, they will stick up for you. They're the person that will ask the questions that sometimes you might find them hard to ask to an editor. So they're really important.
Oh wow, I'm going to be letting you go soon, but it's been amazing talking to you, and there's always so much going on in your life. We've had you involved with the Writer's Block a few times, and I'm always aware that you've got millions of projects, and it doesn't surprise me at all that you already have another project up your sleeve. I'm wondering if you could tell us before you go, what would be, if you could have, I think you've already almost described it, it sounds like you integrate it into your life, but if you could have the perfect writing day where everything was in place to make writing work really beautifully and easily for you, what would it involve?
No emails, I think, number one. So, when you wake up in the morning, you check your phone. So that's really important. And so then you just got a cup of coffee, sit outside, beautiful day. And then to have a set of notes. I always like to finish a day with a set of notes that are kind of open-ended. So on the next day, you know where you're going with your new chapter or whatever you're writing that day. So for me, that's just to have that moment when you just know that you've had no interferences, no phone calls, no emails, and you're just outside with your notebook, cup of coffee, and that's the day. Yeah. And completing what you'd set out to do. Sometimes you don't, and that's fine. I think a lot of writers are hard on themselves, but to kind of hit that mark as close as possible, that's a perfect day. Yeah. So then at the end of the day, you're not thinking about it, you're not going back to it. You can spend time with your partner, or you can go for a hike, and you know that you've got that in the bag, and that's what it is. Every day is getting something in the bag, even if it's something small. Start the day. Try to set out your goals and hit them.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that's a lovely piece of advice, and I can feel that in terms of what you were saying earlier of that 3,000 words a day goal that you have for yourself. And it's lovely to hear that element of, and I can be kind to myself when I have a day where I can see why I didn't reach that. But there is that amazing feeling when it all just flowed and there we go. I wrote that chapter and it came out, and just celebrating those days when they happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very important.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Natasha. And I can't wait to read Undercurrent, out April 2023. Hopefully it will really, get to travel the country. Travel the far and wide. Exactly.
Yeah, brilliant.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Great talking. Thanks, Polly. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Bye. You've been listening to the Writer's Block podcast. Find out more about the Writer's Block at thewritersblock.org.uk. Music and sound was by Jimmy Marshall from Southwestsonic.com. Click subscribe to hear when this episode is released and to help us share these conversations with others. Thank you for listening.